In April of 2022, I started volunteering part-time at a small animal shelter just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. I'd moved there recently after a rough patch in life, new town, new start, and working with animals seemed like a good way to ease back into routine. The shelter was modest, tucked into a wooded lot with a gravel driveway and a single long hallway lined with kennels. It didn't have a fancy name, just a simple wooden sign out front that said Mountain Valley Rescue. Most of the animals there were strays or surrenders, the kind of cases where the original owners couldn't or wouldn't care for them anymore. About 2 weeks into my shifts, I noticed a new intake sheet posted outside Kennel 9. No picture, no name, just the word male, mixed breed, 5 to 7 years, do not move. That last part was underlined twice in red marker. The dog inside was large, maybe a shepherd mix, black coat greying around the snout. He sat perfectly still every time I passed his kennel, not in a fearful way, just still, like he was waiting. His food was barely touched each day, and I never saw him use the bathroom during the times I was there, yet he never looked weak or sick, just unnaturally calm. I asked one of the full-timers about him. Her name was Carol. She frowned and said the dog had shown up about a month before I started. Someone had tied him to the back fence overnight. No microchip, no tags, just a note that read, "Do not take him home, ever." At first the staff thought it was a cruel prank, maybe even a warning about behavior issues, but the strange thing was he didn't do anything wrong. He never barked, never lunged, never growled. He just sat, day after day, completely silent. One night I was working late, helping with intake paperwork, when I realized I'd left a folder in the kennel hallway. It was almost 9 p.m. and most of the lights had already been shut off for the evening. I used my phone's flashlight as I walked back toward the kennels, the beams casting long shadows against the metal grates. When I reached Kennel 9, the dog was standing. First time I had ever seen him move, he was staring directly at me, unblinking, eyes reflecting the light. I stopped in my tracks, something instinctively telling me not to move. Then he sat again, slowly, deliberately. When I returned to the front desk, Carol was waiting. She looked pale. Before I could say anything, she asked if I'd heard it. I didn't understand. Heard what? She said sometimes, late at night, the cameras in the hallway picked up the sound of a dog walking through the kennels, but always after everyone had left. When security footage was reviewed, there was nothing on screen, just the sound of nails clicking against the concrete. They'd replaced several cameras already, thinking it was a glitch, but the sound never stopped, always between 2 and 3 a.m. I asked if it could be the dog in Kennel 9. Her face tightened. She said the sound came from multiple directions, and once or twice it was followed by a low growl, long and distorted, like it had been run through an old tape machine. The staff had started calling the dog Zero, like his kennel number, though no one ever used it around him. They treated him with quiet respect, like someone visiting a grave that didn't belong to them. One morning I came in to find Kennel 9 empty. At first I thought he'd been adopted, and I'll admit I felt relief, but when I checked the log sheet there was no record of a transfer. I found Carol, and she pulled me aside. She said something strange had happened the night before. Around 2:30 a.m. the motion alarm on the rear door triggered. When the shelter manager reviewed the security footage, they found a single frame, just one, where Kennel 9 was open and the dog was gone. No human figure, no sound, just that one still moment. When staff arrived that morning, the back door was locked from the inside. A few days passed, then another intake showed up. Young woman, early 30s, trembling so badly she couldn't fill out the form. She'd found a dog on her porch lying completely still, staring at her front door for hours. She said it wouldn't move, wouldn't respond, not even when she threw water near it. It had the same black coat, same grey snout, same eyes. The intake team rushed outside, but the dog was gone again. Over the next few weeks, reports trickled in, all within a 30-mile radius, same dog, same behavior, appearing out of nowhere, watching silently from porches, windows, even the sides of roads at night. No barking, no aggression, just watching. We stopped keeping records after a while. I left the shelter a few months later. I told myself it was burnout, but the real reason was what happened my last night on shift. I stayed late again, cleaning up the food prep area. When I turned to grab the mop, I heard a low growl behind me. My phone was dead, the lights dimmed. I turned slowly. There, in the glass reflection of the door behind me, was Kennel 9. It was back, and inside it was the dog. But this time he wasn't sitting. He was standing upright on 2 legs and smiling. In September of 2021, I was working overnight shifts at a municipal animal control facility in western Pennsylvania. It wasn't glamorous. The building was an aging cinder block structure with a chain-link perimeter surrounded by woods on 3 sides and a half-abandoned junkyard on the 4th. Most of the staff avoided the graveyard shift, but I didn't mind the quiet. My job was mostly to check on the animals, clean up messes, and make sure nothing went wrong with the old HVAC system, which had a habit of failing on cold nights. I'd usually bring a book, sometimes a podcast, and settle in around midnight after the doors were locked. One night, around 2:40 a.m., I was walking the back corridor between the larger dog enclosures when I heard a voice, faint, almost a whisper. It stopped me in my tracks. The facility was supposed to be empty, no public allowed after 6, no scheduled drop-offs or pickups. At first I thought it might have been someone outside, maybe a loiterer near the fence. But the voice hadn't come from outside. It came from the hallway. I walked back down, slow and quiet, listening hard. The dogs were restless, shifting in their pens, some pacing, others whining, and then I heard it again. A low, muffled voice, raspy, broken, saying something I couldn't quite catch. I stood still, every hair on my arms rising. The sound came from Kennel 4A, one of the isolation runs used for animals under behavioral review. At the time, we only had one dog in there, a brindle pit mix named Ranger who'd been picked up after being found tied to a stop sign in an alley. He was skittish, anxious, but hadn't shown signs of aggression. When I approached the kennel, I saw him lying completely still, head on his paws, eyes wide open. I figured maybe he'd been growling or whining in his sleep. But the whisper had sounded human. I unlocked the latch and opened the gate just a crack to check on him. That's when he bolted, straight past me, down the hall, slipping on the tile as he ran. I chased after him, heart racing, and managed to corner him by the break room, where he cowered behind the vending machine, trembling and growling low in his throat. We got him back in eventually, but after that night he refused to go near the front of his kennel. Always stayed pressed against the back wall. The next few nights, I started noticing changes, small at first. The water bowls in 2 kennels would be empty, but bone dry, like they hadn't held water at all. One morning, I came in and found all the plastic feeding scoops arranged in a perfect circle in the supply closet. There was no explanation, no security footage, no sign of forced entry. And every time it happened, Ranger would start barking wildly, staring toward the hallway as if someone was standing there. Then came the incident that still gives me chills to this day. I was doing rounds just after 3 a.m. when the power flickered. Not a full outage, just enough to shut off the lights and reboot the control panels. It happens sometimes in old buildings, but this time the emergency lights didn't come on. The halls went pitch black. I had my phone flashlight, but as I turned it on, I heard the whisper again. This time closer. It came from the intercom speaker near the rear exit. Just one word, drawn out and distorted. Stay, that was it. Just that. My chest tightened. I turned around to leave, but the hallway looked longer than it had before, like it had stretched somehow. I could see kennel gates lining the walls, but the numbers were wrong. They were repeating. 3B, 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 over and over. I ran back the way I came, and it took far longer than it should have to reach the front of the building. When I finally got back to the office, the power snapped back on. The lights returned. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. Every animal in the building was facing the same direction, not toward me, not toward their gates, but toward the back hallway. All of them silent, staring. The next morning, I told the site manager what happened. She brushed it off at first until I showed her the camera footage from that night. There was a 2-minute gap in the feed, right around 3:02 a.m. When the video resumed, the hallway camera showed something strange. In the still frame, just before playback resumed, there was a figure near the back exit. Not me, not staff. It was hunched, barefoot, arms too long for its body, with what looked like patchy fur or matted hair on its back. The timestamp disappeared in that frame, replaced by a row of zeros, and then the feed resumed like nothing happened. They moved Ranger to a new facility a few days later. He was adopted a month after that, but his new owner returned him within a week, saying the dog refused to enter the house at night. He would dig at the door, whining and biting the frame, staring at something behind her. I quit the night shift after that. Got a job at a regular vet clinic with regular hours. But every now and then, I still check the security logs online, just curiosity, I guess. And last month I saw a familiar name on an intake report. Ranger, picked up again, same behavior. But now they're saying he barks at reflections, not his own. Just mirrors, windows, even polished metal, like he sees something in them the rest of us can't. And honestly, after everything I witnessed in that hallway, I believe him. In July of 2023, I was helping a friend named Alyssa manage her privately run animal rescue out in rural Oregon. It was a large property with a barn converted into kennel space and a few fenced play yards. Alyssa ran everything with just 2 other volunteers, and for a few weeks that summer, I offered to help while I took time off from my regular job. It wasn't your typical shelter. They mainly rescued animals from hoarding situations and abuse cases. Dogs, cats, sometimes even goats or parrots. The barn had 12 indoor kennels, each with laminated ID tags showing the animal's name, intake date and health notes. It was efficient, clean and quiet, too quiet sometimes. On my second week there, I noticed a 13th cage along the far back wall, smaller than the others, just barely large enough for a medium-sized dog. Unlike the others, it had no name tag, no food or water bowl. It looked old, the metal bars slightly bent, rust blooming along the latches. The kennel was empty when I first noticed it, so I figured it was just an old unit they hadn't gotten around to tossing. But 2 nights later, during a routine closing check while Alyssa was away for a veterinary pickup, I found something inside that cage. A dog I didn't recognize, jet black, with short, bristled fur, no collar. Its eyes were pale, almost silver, and wide open, unblinking as it watched me. I hadn't seen any new arrivals that day, and I would have noticed if someone had dropped off a dog that size. Still, I figured maybe one of the other volunteers placed him there while they processed his intake. The thing was, the gate was padlocked. A thick rusted lock hanging from a chain looped through the bars. The dog just sat inside, staring at me. No whimpering, no tail wag, just silence. When I asked the others the next day about the dog, no one knew what I was talking about. I described him, the cage, the padlock, nothing. Alyssa frowned and said they hadn't used that cage in years. It didn't even have a working latch. She even walked back there with me to check, and of course it was empty again, dusty, no signs of a dog. And the chain was there, but the lock was gone. I convinced myself I'd imagined it, maybe a dream or sleepwalking. I'd been working long hours, and the barn could get surreal late at night when the crickets outside drowned out every sound inside. A few nights later I stayed past midnight, helping reorganize feed storage, and once again I passed by that cage on the way out. This time the dog was there again, same black coat, same unblinking eyes, but this time its mouth was open, not panting, just open, like it was frozen mid-growl, except no sound came out. I stared at it for a moment before the lights above started to flicker. I swear the temperature dropped in that part of the barn. I backed away and left without checking the other animals. I couldn't explain why, but every instinct told me not to turn my back on it and not to open that cage no matter what. That night I had dreams. Over and over I saw the dog sitting in the cage, but the barn was flooded. The water was rising up the walls, the lights submerged, sparking, and the dog, he never moved, just stared as the water rose above his head. I woke up gasping. The next morning, one of the goats was dead, found in its pen with no signs of struggle, no wounds, just lying there like it had stopped breathing in its sleep. Alyssa said this sometimes happened with rescues, especially older animals, but the night after that, a dog in Kennel 2, a perfectly healthy husky mix, was found in the same condition. Lifeless, eyes wide open, no marks, no explanation. The following evening, I decided to check the security camera logs. The barn had an old wired system, one camera at each end and one above the main hallway. I pulled up the timeline for the previous night and fast-forwarded, and there it was. At 2:46 a.m., the camera captured movement. The dog, the black one, walking down the kennel aisle, not being led, not escaping, just walking. Its movements were unnatural, slow and jerky, like each step had to be remembered before taken. Its mouth never closed. It stopped at Kennel 2, stared inside for a full minute, then turned and disappeared down the far hallway where no camera was installed. I didn't tell Alyssa. I didn't know how. Instead, I took the keys the next morning and unlocked the chain on the old 13th cage. It was empty, of course it was. But deep in the back corner, hidden beneath the shadows, was something I hadn't seen before. A torn scrap of blue collar with a faded metal tag still attached. I picked it up. It said, Benny, DNR, do not rehouse. DNR, do not rehouse. That term is only used in the most extreme cases, animals that are too aggressive, too unstable to be safely adopted, euthanasia orders, but there was no Benny listed in any of the shelter's records, no medical file, no intake form, nothing. That night I packed my bags and left. A few weeks later, Alyssa called. The barn had caught fire, faulty wiring. They said several of the cages were damaged, but no animals were harmed. She said it was strange, though. When firefighters went through the wreckage, they found something behind the 13th cage, a small grave, unmarked, shallow, and inside was the skeleton of a medium-sized dog, with a shattered jaw and a blue collar still around its neck. If these animal shelter stories gave you chills, make sure to like, share, subscribe and hit the bell icon, because sometimes the ones we rescue aren't the ones in cages.